Well, the economic impact of the stage 4 lockdown in Melbourne is undeniable, but exactly how much that will be is yet to be determined. The previous estimation of $3.3 billion is outdated, and with Victoria making up a quarter of the national economy, the blow is expected to be huge. Sam Dastyari is here with us to cut through the political spin and chat to us more about this. Hello, Sam. Good to see you,
Great to
sir.
be here. Great to
Hey,
be here.
Sam, the messaging from Prime Minister Scott Morrison is that we're all in this together. So that raises a question. Should the rest of Australia pitch in and pay a new tax to help Victorian workers during this time?
Yeah, look, we say we're all in it together. The fact is that we're not. Victoria is obviously being harder hit than everywhere else in the country, and putting aside all the kind of ridiculous kind of at times at the start a bit more jovial banter about, oh, look at Victoria, they've stuffed up, everyone else is doing better. Look, I think there's a real issue here because you saw the announcement yesterday: 250,000 more people having to step down, and there's going to be longer term economic consequences. Look, what I said, and I've been saying today, and I've been saying for a few days now, is that there is a solution. It's not pretty, it's not pleasant. You put a 1% levy on the entire country. So the next year, there'll be a 1% levy for the virus that will only go to Victoria. That's in addition to all the other economic expenditure. But we've done things like this when it's come to floods. We've done things like this when it's come to natural disasters. When one part of the country is worse hit than others, if we're genuinely all in it together, we're going to have to foot the bill.
But Sam, I want to ask you a quick question here. This always gets me really riled up, and that is massive corporations. We can't seem to work this out, and I don't know why. Apple and Google do not pay their fair share of tax in this bloody country. So is it not unfair, especially in this time when we're all doing it tough, Victorians are doing it tougher, where we actually bloody start making some leeway and taxing these bloody bastards who take billions of dollars, don't pay their tax? They should be step up. Sam, your thoughts?
Look. That has been. They're two separate issues, right? Where I want to be a bit careful is when we turn around and say just do the big tech giants. That's a whole separate issue about how they're not paying tax, and just so kind of your listeners and viewers get a sense of it. The way they don't do it is that they really it's really about cost shifting, and there's many ways of doing it. But a very simple way of doing it will be this: let's say an iPad gets made for $15, right? In terms of everything that's in it. I would then sell it to my Singapore company for $88. Then Singapore sells it to Australia from $88 to $888, and they sell it to Australia for $950. Right? And then where has all the money been made? The money's all actually been made in Singapore, so I'm not really paying as much tax. I'm paying, a 4, 6, 8% tax rate, depending on what deal I've done with the government, and I'm not paying tax in Australia. They're the kind of, it's a bit more complicated than that these days. That's a simplistic look at how it's done. Look, that is a serious problem, but the issue is this. Tackling that problem isn't the immediate issue. The immediate issue, and there's a whole bunch of WTO and world trade and international tax avoidance issues tied into all that. But if we're going to be realistic and fast about this, it's going to have to be something like a blanket 1% tax. And the bigger issue here is the rest of the country prepared to pay for Victoria to get special treatment? And I think they need to.
Yeah,
It's a hard one. It's a hard one, Sam, because a lot of people are doing it tough. So, adding another tax to people on middle wages or lower wages.
Look, it's not easy. I agree with you. It's not pleasant. It's realistic. And I think there's a lot of, well, it's the Victoria, it's their problem, it's this and that. The reality is this. I mean, today it's the virus in Victoria. Tomorrow it could be a flood in Queensland. It could be the virus as well. It could be a national disaster. It can be anything. But, sometimes it's put up or shut up. There's a lot of talk around we're all in this together and we're a nation
and I do
united
see your point with that. Yeah, Ben?
I was just going to say, what's something that we've seen before in history where money has been allocated to a state because of a particular situation? Because I'd also like to know, we've had the bushfires at the start of the year, but then you've also had COVID-19 affect Victoria badly. When it comes down to allocating which states need to be looked after, I mean, how are they supposed to deem which one is more, in need of money than another?
Yeah, look, they're not easy decisions to make. I mean, what you're referring to then with the disaster relief funds, as you can imagine, have naturally been focused very heavily on the eastern seaboard. If you remember a couple of years ago, it's about 6 years ago now, there were those terrible floods up in Queensland, and there was a whole bunch of federal money that essentially went specifically to kind of, I like the term bailout, but for supporting them for their rebuild. I think it's about 7 years now, to be exact. It happens a lot during national disasters, where you essentially pick one part of the country and put your funds there. This is a bit different. Where it's a bit different is in those situations, nowhere else in the country was really impacted. One part of the country got impacted. Here, the difference is everywhere is impacted. It's just that Victoria's been impacted a lot worse. And there's a separate debate about who's to blame and whether it was the government and, what happened in hotel quarantine. And we've talked about that all on this show before. But that doesn't really change the fact that if I'm one of the 250,000 people who just yesterday got the bad news, or if I'm a Victorian family who's really, really struggling with Victorian business, should we specifically bail them out or not? And I'm saying we should, but again, these aren't easy calls because government can do this thing that's really pretty and easy, where they just talk about the money. But if we're going to be honest, we also have to talk about where it's coming from.
So, Sam, is this a question, and I'm not leading you down here, but is this a question of leadership federally, where does Scott Morrison and does the federal government need to do more about uniting the country and saying, Victoria is not a separate country here. Victoria is part of our country. They contribute greatly to the national economy. Where should it come from, this way of uniting everyone, saying that we should do the 1%?
It has to come from the federal government. It's the only place it can come from. And also, too, it's got to be a little bit honest. A lot of these things, we tend to be a bit dishonest as well. So when we do these bailout packages and, talk about JobKeeper and these things, there's always a little bit of talk about, oh, yeah, we're going to have to pay for it later and this and that. I actually think the Australian public would be a lot more supportive of some of these measures over time if we're just frank with them and said, look, okay, Victoria's, in a serious situation at the moment. Their workforce is going to need a proper bailout. Just to give you a sense of the figures, a 1%, this is a very, very rough figures. You're looking at about $1.5 billion. It'd be $1.5 billion job creation fund. That's what you're looking at here. It's not small, but it's not the biggest thing ever. But yeah, to go to those kinds of programs to say how do you restart an economy at the end of this, because you don't want to be in a situation where one of your major cities is going to have an unemployment rate maybe 2-3% higher than the other kind of comparative cities. We just cannot let Melbourne die.
It's the Ben, Rob and Robbo, Ben, Rob and Robbo, Ben, Rob and Robbo Show.